there is one thing to learn from this movie. It is that art kills. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is my review for the new Netflix original film, Velvet Buzzsaw. Such a weird name, but yes, it is true. That is the name of the film, Velvet Buzzsaw. Get that stuck in your head because it's so crazy that that is the title of a movie. This movie is directed by Dan Gilroy of Nightcrawler fame. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Rene Russo, John Malkovich, and Toni Collette. This is a star-studded cast, by the way. I just want to kind of point that out. This film is about an unknown artist who dies. His paintings later get discovered, and a spiritual force exacts its revenge on those who take greed in his art. This movie was a lot different than what I expected. I had seen the trailer for this a couple weeks ago, and I was really looking forward to this movie. I saw Jake Gyllenhaal was attached, Rene Russo. I saw John Malkovich, Natalia Dyer, who I love, by the way. She is great in this film, and she's also really good as Nancy Wheeler in Stranger Things. And so, on its surface, I thought that this was going to be kind of a pseudo-horror film. Very artsy, very different, kind of trapped a little bit, but it's really not that on the surface. This is more of a dramatic thriller, mixed with some horror-ish elements. There are some moments in this film where they do go for the scares. Some of them do pay off. There's a couple jump scares that worked okay. I mean, you can kind of see them coming a mile away. And then there are some of those scares that they use when it comes to eyes of the painting moving, or, you know, a hand kind of reaches out with the painting. So they use those types of effects to really scare you as an audience member. But this is more of a thriller and definitely a dramatic film. There are dramatic elements to each of these characters. You have Jake Gyllenhaal's character, who is a art reviewer, and he has to go and he looks at different art. He does, I don't know if he does a blog or a newspaper, didn't really say what he did, but he goes and writes a review on the art, kind of like what I do with movie reviews. He does the same thing with art. Then you have Rene Russo's character, who is an owner of an art establishment, so she ends up buying a lot of paintings. She tries to hire some artists on to do some projects and some presentations for her. You have John Malkovich's character, who is actually very, very minimal in this film, which I was a little upset about because I love John Malkovich. I think he's a stud, he's a star. His character, he's a painter, but he hasn't been finding his groove lately, and he is trying to kind of figure out what it takes to be an artist again. So you have all these different plot lines kind of at the core of this film, and you get emotionally invested in some of these characters. Some of these characters worked for me. One of them is Jake Gyllenhaal's character, because not only is it that he's an art reviewer and he's having problems pretty much figuring out why his critiquing skills are kind of going down a little bit, why a lot of people aren't giving him the recognition or the reputable status he used to once have, and he has problems because he's in a relationship with this man. But then he starts to develop a relationship with this woman, Josephina, in the film. And so there's all these things that are kind of spiraling out of control for some of these characters. And some of them worked, some of them didn't. One of them is the Josephina character. I couldn't stand her. One thing I will say about this film, a couple of negatives. One is that this movie starts off really slow. And it doesn't really pick up until about the second act of the movie. That's when you kind of start to see all of the creepy things happening when it comes to the paintings. And they're figuring out who this Dees guy was and what his background is, and it kind of dives more into that creepy side and that horror-ish side. But the first act of this film just drags on, and they're trying to develop a plot and a narrative. The second problem that I have with this film, this is my biggest issue with this movie. This movie does not feel cinematic. It feels very small-scaled, pretty much at television status. It feels like I was watching an HBO episode. And it's not the whole film, but there are parts in this movie that really don't feel cinematic. They use certain camera angles when they're outside, wide shots, that to me don't look good at all when it comes to a movie. Some of the lighting is really bad. And it's lighting that you'd see in like a CW show or a show that you'd watch on TNT. And so there are those moments in this film where it kind of just takes me out of the movie altogether, and it doesn't put me into that cinematic experience that I want when I'm watching a film like this, and a film that I was really anticipating as well. It just felt more like a small-scale episode of The Wire. Not that there's any problem with that, but when it comes to a cinematic film like this and what they're trying to establish, it just didn't work for me on that type of level. Now I know that other movies have had small budgets, and that's fine. This one has a small budget, and that's okay. But do something with that small budget. Make it feel more cinematic. That is my biggest gripe with this film. Altogether though, the performances are great. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is outstanding. I love everything he does, and what he brought to this role was different and unique. Also, this film is very original. It's very different, and it has a very artsy style to it, but in a beautiful way. Some of the gore aspects, some of the kill aspects in this film are awesome. There's this one scene in particular with this character who has paint pretty much running all up her body continuously. I thought that was so cool, and I just really love that scene a lot. This is a different type of film. If you go in expecting this to be a horror film, you're going to be disappointed. If you go in expecting it to be a dramatic thriller, then I think you will like this film, because they do have those horror-ish aspects and qualities to it, and it has that thriller vibe throughout. So, is this a waste of time? I don't think so. I think you can watch this movie, have a good time with it. It's not a movie that I'd watch again, but for the experience, it was quite entertaining. Make sure you like this video, guys. Also, make sure you go check out my Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace review with my buddy Clayton. I worked so hard on that video. I put a lot of passion and heart into it, and it took hours to edit, so make sure you guys go and give that a watch. I will put that right here. Subscribe to my channel if you are new, and as always, I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.